Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jeremiah DeGullen, the Insurance Solutions Advisor for the Center for Professional and Executive Development, or CPED. I'm excited to have you all with us as we hear from Michelle Venturini as we talk about developing leaders at all levels of your insurance organizations, specifically through mentorship. Before I introduce Michelle, I'd like to share a few words about the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development. CPED offers programs and certificates that will give you the modern, relevant skills needed to advance in your career. All of our programs offer interactive live learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. For more information on CPED, please visit our website at uwcped.org. Now, if you have any questions during today's webinar, you can submit those questions using either the chat or the Q&A buttons on the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen. We'll pose questions that are submitted during the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. We also want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be made available to each one of you within the coming days. Now, I'd love to introduce our instructor, Michelle Venturini. Michelle's background includes more than 25 years of leadership and operations experience across all HR functions. She's worked in several industries, including biotech, software, telecommunications, and in financial services, which is closely related with our insurance industry. In addition, Michelle is an adjunct faculty member of the Masters in Biotech program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is a frequent presenter at local events. She has advised senior leaders on a wide range of human resource topics, including leadership, talent development, strategic staffing, and employee relations. Michelle, I'm so excited to have you here with us today to share your expertise. Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah. There's nothing like hearing your bio to remind you of just how many times you have been around the block. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I am really honored to be here today. This is a topic that I really am passionate about. I really believe in the importance of mentoring and coaching. So I thank you all for attending. And if you have questions as we're going along, I'm perfectly fine with being interrupted. So you can type them into the chat or even go off mute if you'd like, and let me know. And there'll be time at the end for Q&A as well. So 3 main points that we're going to cover today. First is, what is the role of relationships in employee development and organizational development? We'll talk about building a mentor program, what that takes, what it might look like. And then we'll get a little bit granular and talk about how do we manage these mentor meetings. I have my mentor in front of me or my mentee in front of me, and what do I do now? It seems like there's a lot of silence. I don't know what to say. So we'll talk about how to manage those meetings and how to make them as productive and meaningful as possible. When I'm instructing, this is something that I believe at my course, so I put it at the beginning of every class that I'm instructing. And that is that everyone has something to teach, everyone has something to learn. None of us have all of the answers, so please offer your insight, ask your questions, and we're going to learn together. And we will start with, what is the role of relationships in employee and organizational growth? Now we're going to take a look at that old familiar 70-20-10 model that talks about 70% of development happens through experience, through hands-on, through doing project work, through special assignments. 20% of development happens through relationships, whether it's a manager, a mentor, a coach, a friend, a family member. And 10% of development happens through traditional learning, such as classroom, webinars, books, what have you. And as you look at this distribution, it would be really tempting to say, well, if 70% happens through experience, then isn't that where we should invest our time and our energy? Because if that's how people learn, then why do we worry about the other 30%? And here's the reality. 70% does happen through experience, but experience takes a lot of time, like years. So it's not necessarily the fastest or the most efficient way to learn. There's a lot of trial and error. We learn from our mistakes. Mistakes come with a price. It's a price that is worth paying because of the growth and development that happens, but it isn't cheap. The 20%, the relationships are very important. It requires the right person at the right time. And that 10% is an opportunity to really be intense and very focused on a specific topic. So even though it's 10% of the whole, it's a very important 10%. And the reality, when employees and ourselves are being developed, it looks more like this. It's not that you get the 70% and then the 20% on top of it and the 10% on top of that. They are very much happen interchangeably and at different points in your career. So all of these development methods are really important. What's something to really keep in mind is that it takes the right development at the right time is really what is going to be most impactful, regardless of what the development method might look like. And so for today, we're talking about mentor and coaching. And so we're in that 20% of relationships. But these relationships need to be intentional in that if we are going to develop, or if we want to help our employees develop through a relationship, it takes someone with the right expertise and the right experience when it is needed and as it is needed. So it can be programmed, we can plan for things, but what's really going to matter is that the right person is available at the right time and when they are needed. Let's talk about the relationships and the developmental relationships that exist within an organization. We have our manager, we have a mentor, and we have coach. And let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. The manager's role is to focus on performance and results. So when they provide feedback, and the development that they provide is going to be very focused on instruction and correction and getting something done, getting done whatever is in front of us. Their scope is usually immediate and transactional. So again, when a manager is developing, they're teaching you something very specific. They're instructing or course correcting on something very specific. A mentor, on the other hand, their purpose is teaching and growth. So they are going to provide insights and advice and experience that is more telling in nature. It's going to be more guiding and encouraging to the mentee. And their scope is near-term and specific. So a mentor really works best when there is something specific that an employee needs to know, and it's something that they need to know pretty quickly. Like maybe not today, but probably within the next week is when that's going to be most effective. And our third type of relationship is our coach. So the coach's focus is discovery and self-reliance. So a coach is going to ask questions. The coach does not have the answer, but they will guide you to discover the answer for yourself. So they're going to challenge some of your assumptions. They're going to challenge what you've done and what you believe, and they're going to hold you accountable. You said last time that you were going to try this. How did it go? And the coach's scope is long-term and directional. So it might not be a specific issue or a specific problem, but a coach is going to be more general in terms of where is your career going? What are your career goals? What's the leadership legacy that you want to leave? That gives us a little bit of a background between these three relationships that we hear a lot about. Now, your manager can be your mentor. Those can happen. If you find yourself in this role, though, I advise as a manager that you be really clear, okay, I'm talking as your mentor or I'm talking as your manager, because the roles really do start to get overlapping, and it's really helpful to keep them distinct. For a manager to be a coach is pretty challenging. That would be pretty difficult to do, not impossible, But I would not encourage that particular overlap of roles. And it's important to note that having a coach or being a coach is not the same as a manager using a coaching technique. Managers can use coaching techniques very effectively. But in this case, we're talking about coaching as an actual separate role. So who has responsibilities for what when we are in a mentor and a mentee relationship? The mentor's role is to provide structure and shape and to make sure that progression is happening with the relationship. So the mentor is going to facilitate expectation setting. They're going to make sure that you talk about, this is what I expect, this is what we're agreeing to, this is what we're going to do next time. They are certainly going to share their experience. They're going to proactively provide advice. They will sometimes hold up a mirror and say, be careful, if you do that, this is something that might happen. So you should be prepared for that or have an alternate plan. You might do some role playing with your mentor. Your mentor is your cheerleader, and so they will empathize, plan, listen, and challenge. The mentee owns this process. They schedule the meetings, they do the follow-up, they implement, and they report on their progress. The mentee has responsibility for what is the outcome of this relationship and this program. The responsibility for making sure that that happens rests with the mentee. They should be prepared for meetings and actively participate and set the tone for conversation, as well as being open and receptive. Let's talk about building a mentor program. And I'm going to ask Brooke to post a poll question because I'm interested in finding out how many of you have been a mentor and what has been your experience. Really interesting. A lot of people talk about being a mentor, being a mentee, and the experiences really vary across from one end of the spectrum to the other. So it's always really interesting to find out exactly the experience that people have had as a mentor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. So 36% loved it and was able to have an immediate impact. 16% of you said it was okay. We met a few times, but it didn't really go anywhere. None of you said it was a horrible experience, and almost half of you said that you have never been a mentor. So this is really helpful. And it's pretty typical. There are a certain percentage that they've had a great experience and they loved it. There's usually a surprising percentage that said, I was a mentor, it wasn't the best experience. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what are some of the things that get in the way, some of the things that prevent the mentor and mentee relationship from really being as productive as it could be. So at the top, we have the mentee expects immediate results with minimum effort. So this is the magic wand. The mentee thinks, I'm going to wave a magic wand, I'm going to get all this wisdom, and my career is just going to soar. The second event that I have seen happen is that the reason for entering into the relationship is unclear or unfocused. People go, I thought I would try it. And while that's not a bad idea, it really makes it difficult to get the most out of the relationship. Some people see mentoring as a fast track. It's a check the box exercise. I'm on a promotion, I'm going to get a mentor and I'll get a promotion. A mentoring exit strategy isn't discussed. This is something that I think is really important in the mentor and the mentee relationship is, how are we going to know when this relationship has run its course? And it might never run its course. It might be something that carries on for years and years, or it might be something that lasts for a month and then you decide to end it. But it's important to have that conversation and what does that look like? If the roles aren't clarified, that becomes an issue. If the mentor's experience doesn't match what the mentee needs in the moment, and remember I talked before about it's the right person at the right time. And so if the experience doesn't match what the mentee needs right then, it's probably not going to be as productive as it could be. and goals are unclear or non-existent. So I'm going to invite you in the chat of these 7, just write the letters or indicate the numbers where you have had this experience. And this has been something that has perhaps limited your experience as a mentor. You just want to add those in. I'll take a look at what. 6, 5, 7, 6, 4. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Good. Yeah. So we see that there really are a range of experiences. So let's talk about what do we do to proactively get in front of some of these things happening. So number 1, expecting, and the mentee who expects immediate results. It might suit your purposes to have a selection process to be a mentee. And part of that might be what is your commitment, and being really clear that there will be work that needs to be done. And some of that work might happen outside of normal work hours. This is not something that's done because it's easy. It's something that's done because you're being really intentional. The mentee should have and identify a specific outcome. I've had situations where people have said, I feel stagnated, I feel stuck, I want a mentor. And all that they know is they want a mentor, but they don't know why they want a mentor or what they want the mentor to do for them. And when that happens, the relationship is almost always pretty dissatisfying for both. So it's really important to have something specific that you want to get out of it. And that something specific might change over time. When mentoring is done to get a promotion, it absolutely is not a fast track to promotion. It's not a check the box exercise. It's no guarantee. Now, what the mentee does with the mentor's input and guidance, that most certainly can pave the way to a promotion. But just having a mentor by itself is not going to do the trick. An exit strategy isn't discussed. So have an endpoint. You might be meeting with your mentee and I really need help with this. And so you work through this, whatever that is, and things have improved. And then you might need to talk about, do we want to continue meeting? Do we need to continue to meet? And even if you set an endpoint and you get to that point and you're like, oh, let's keep going, that's fine. You can change it. But have an exit strategy to the relationship. There should be agreement on roles and responsibilities. And you can even use that list from my previous slide. But it's really important for the mentee to understand that this relationship is for them and for their development, and they have accountability for getting the most out of it that they can. Mentors and mentees are most effective when they are matched based on what the mentee needs and what the mentor can provide. It can be a perfect stranger within your organization, or it can be someone that you work with all the time. But the match should be made based on development needs, not based on status or popularity or who's easy to get along with. It's interesting sometimes how those matches are made. So it's important to focus on development. Goals are really important. And I don't mean you have to have a SMART goal for every meeting that you have and be really structured about it, but know what outcome you are looking for. What is the purpose? Why are we meeting today? Why are we embarking on this relationship? What's the point of this exercise that I'm going to ask you to do? So you know what the end point is going to be. And I think if you follow this list, a lot of the challenges that exist within mentor programs will be cleared up. So let's talk a little bit about some non-traditional options to mentor and mentee programs. I'm going to go through each of these in detail. So first we have speed mentoring. So this makes a reference to speed dating. Back in the early 2000s and the 1990s, there used to be speed dating, and a bunch of people would show up at the same place, and you'd sit across the table from somebody, and you'd have a 7 to 10 minute conversation, and then someone would ring a bell, and then you'd rotate to the next person. And so over the course of an evening, you got to talk to a lot of different people. Similar when we talk about speed mentoring. So how it works is this is going to be done for a specific topic. So you're going to want to engage mentors who have specific expertise. For example, project management. We are having project management mentors at the speed mentoring event. If this is something you're interested in, why don't you show up? And then mentees who have specific questions will have 10 to 15 minutes with each mentor. So it might be, I am a project manager. How do you get people to respond to your email? That might be your specific question. It might be, I really want to be a project manager, but I'm really afraid of presenting. Presentation skills are really hard for me. How did you get over your fear? So the questions could run the gamut. And then after 10, 15 minutes, you're going to rotate to the next mentor, ask them the same question or a different question. And this is something that could be done really at any interval that you want, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually. It might be really interesting to organize this by department. So for example, you could have leaders from your claims organization be the mentors, and then you have people from marketing as the mentees. And it's a chance for the marketing people to really sort of pick the brain of the claims people. It's a chance for the claims people to share what they know and to have some influence and to really build those connections between departments. This can also be done as a way to integrate new employees. So the mentors are leaders, the mentees are new employees, and you just rotate. So here's why this works. It is a lot of connections in a short amount of time. It's a way to engage mentors who might be in high demand, whose time is limited. It's a way to engage them for an hour or two and have them touch and impact a lot of people in a short amount of time. A mentee who comes prepared with specific questions is going to learn a lot in a short amount of time, and it's going to be intense. But these events are fun, the energy is high, and there might be a connection. Just like the speed datings, you might find someone that you want to go on a second date with, and it might be that a mentor and a mentee make a connection, and they decide to continue the relationship. Second option is group mentoring. So this is a one-on-many, where you have one mentor who meets with a small group of mentees, probably no more than 4 to 5, any more than that, and the conversation just gets a little bit unwieldy and people don't get equal time. You might have it that mentees send discussion topics before the meeting to give the mentor time to prepare and to think about responses. This might be something that happens once. It might be ongoing. It might be specific to a topic. I've also used this really effectively when there's a visiting leader. When I've worked for large organizations, global organizations, and there's a business unit vice president or somebody is coming to town that doesn't come to town very often. And of course, they want to meet a lot of people and everybody wants to get to know them. And I have used this very effectively in that I've done a Q&A, sort of like almost an interview with the visiting leader, and anyone who wants to can attend. And I ask questions like, what is your biggest mistake? How did you recover? What would you tell yourself when you were starting the job? Or what would you tell yourself if you were starting your job now? In other words, what have you learned along the way? But it's a really effective way for a lot of people to get face time. Again, it's an efficient way to engage with someone who might be an in-demand mentor. The mentees in this situation usually form a cohort or a group of their own. And so you are building those relationships and you're building those networks within your organization. There tends to be a lot of synergy. And there's a way to spread knowledge from the leader to the employees. And so they're spreading their knowledge, they're spreading their influence. They're reinforcing the cultural aspects that you really want future leaders to have. It's just a way for a very influential person to meet and influence many individuals in a short period of time. Structured mentoring. So this might be what we think of most of the time when we think of mentoring. This is usually one-on-one. One organization that I work with, they set a predefined number of meetings over a period of time. So they run this, and this is a professional organization, so it's not a company, it's a networking professional organization. And they set, January, February, March, they run a mentoring program every year. and there's a fixed number of meetings. You're supposed to meet 6 times during that period. The expectations are set very clearly. This could be something that you run once a year. It could be something that you run twice a year. This is a really effective approach if you have people who are interested, like, well, I think I would want to be a mentor, but I'm not really sure what it involves. I don't really want to make a commitment. This is a way to get those folks to sort of test the water, dip their toe in, see if you like it. The endpoint is predefined, so we know it's not going to linger and you have sort of this awkward ending to the relationship. Because it is concentrated, the conversations will be very focused and very, just very targeted towards what the mentee needs. And again, the endpoint, having an endpoint, it really helps. It's really kind of liberating to know this is going to end. But you have the option of continuing if you would like to. Topic mentoring. So to do this, you might survey mentees and ask, what topic would you like to be mentored about? Or what is most challenging for you where you would like some help? So it might range from professional relationships to technical expertise to how do I advance, interpersonal skills. It could really run the range. But you'll survey your mentees and you'll find out what they really want. And then based on the responses that you get, you will identify topic mentors who have expertise in that topic. So if a lot of people have said, I feel stuck in my career, like I feel like I'm at the top, I don't know where to go next, what do I do? You might have someone who has worked through that exact issue themselves, or who has a passion for helping people get over that hurdle when they feel stuck. And so you set up a topic mentoring program where we're going to meet, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about project management. We're going to talk about time management, whatever the topic might be. And this can be an ongoing program, or you could combine it with any of the others. You could do this as a speed mentoring. The topic at today's speed mentoring meeting is time management. Or we're going to do a group mentoring session about customer relationships, whatever the topic might be. This is helpful for mentors who feel like, I know some things, but I don't feel like I know enough to be somebody's mentor. This gets them comfortable with the process. It builds up their confidence that, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. And so they may consider them an expert themselves, an expert in time management, but they learn, like, I really have a lot of other things to offer as well. Mentees get very targeted and very specific help when they need it. And remember that 20%, that relationship piece of the professional development, all about having the right person with the right expertise at the right time. This is something that could be really helpful with people in your organization getting ready for certification exams. I have taken a few of those. I've worked at a big insurance company, and I've taken some of those insurance exams, and they are intense. This might be, hey, we're going to have mentoring. Somebody with expertise in a certain topic is going to be there. They can help you prepare for your exam. Might be a really effective way to do that. And then our last version is something that I call reverse mentoring. And so often when we think of mentoring, we think of the mentor as the experience, the wise, the person, usually older, who has more experience. But I think there's a lot to be said for reverse mentoring. And people who are baby boomers or Gen X, and they're like, there's so much AI, there's all this social media. I know some, I don't know enough. I've never been on TikTok. How does this work? Help me understand it. So setting up this reverse mentoring relationship where somebody from a younger generation helps somebody from an older generation. This can be really exciting, and I've seen it actually work very, very well. For your organization, first of all, you're connecting those generations and you're strengthening those relationships. One of the keys to employee retention is to have employees with more than one connection point within the organization. If all that an employee does is they come in, they put their head down, they do their job exceptionally well, but they don't have another connection, whether it's a resource group or a friend or someone else who has similar interests, your risks of losing them are quite high. This is one way, especially among people newer to the workforce, to give them a connection into the organization and to give them another anchor, and it will help your retention. This also really builds your leadership pipeline. When you have newer, less experienced employees put in a position where their knowledge and their experience is really valued, you're building those leadership muscles informally, but you are building them. And that will make a huge difference down the road when it comes to succession planning and the next generation of leaders at your organization. And it really just creates these ongoing connections. So what does a mentoring program need to be successful? It must have a champion. Could be in HR, doesn't have to be in HR. Although a mentoring program should at least be launched in cooperation with HR. But the champion is someone who they believe in mentoring. They believe in the importance of being intentional about forming these developmental relationships. This has to be the person that is willing to ask for resources or has authority to provide resources. This is the person who is able to solicit mentors and maybe recruit mentors and have that kind of influence where they can convince people to come and be a mentor. But it's not the champion alone. All leadership has to support and buy in to a mentoring program. It is going to take resources. Even though it isn't a class that you have to pay a fee for, or it isn't a project that has an ROI on it, it still is going to take resources, usually in the form of time. So there has to be leadership support for that. There also has to be leadership recognition that this is a viable, important, critical development opportunity for our organization. And we view it as such, and we see it as important. And we do look at people who've had a mentor or have been a mentor as people who are really serious about advancing their careers. There has to be management knowledge and commitment. So this refers to the direct manager of someone who is a mentee. We're coming up on the end of the year. I know that many organizations have performance reviews at the end of the year or the very beginning of the next year. And what's your development going to be is one of the conversations that comes up all the time. So the manager has to be committed to making it acceptable for one of their employees to take some time to meet with a mentor, maybe to take on a special project, maybe to use some of their time resources to follow through on assignments. It really takes that partnership between the employee and their manager and the mentor. This will take time. This isn't going to be an immediate result, although you may see some initial immediate results, but it is going to take several cycles of however you structure your mentor program for it to really take hold in your organization and for people to not even think about it anymore. You know what, that would be a good opportunity for a mentor, or I think you would be a really good mentor, especially on this specific topic. It takes time. This is where the champion is also important because they need to keep that momentum going. They need to keep energy and interest high. And then, of course, you need mentees and you need mentors. The question might be, what is in it for the mentor? And this is a reciprocal relationship, and the mentor should expect and should get as much out of it as the mentee does. Although the reasons might not be as overt, it is certainly a way to develop your leadership skills. It's a way to practice giving feedback. It's a way to practice being clear and giving directions. It's a way to practice storytelling. It's a very effective form of communication. So practice it with your mentee, one-on-one with your mentee. Bring it back to your team. You'll be more effective overall. There's a lot of personal growth and reflection that happens when you are the mentor. It causes you to really think back on your career and, wow, I have really come a long way. I have really learned a lot. Of course, I still make a lot of mistakes, but I'm really happy with what I've done. So it's a good sort of boost and a reminder of just how capable we are. It gives the mentor an expanded perspective because they're going to see questions from their mentee who might be from a different department. And it's going to change their perspective. I never thought of it that way, but I can see why it is a problem and see why it's a challenge. Maybe I need to look differently at how I do things. It is that opportunity to reflect on where you've come with your career. It's an opportunity to grow your profession. And this might be more appropriate if it's for a professional group, but as you can train and upskill people who are earlier in their careers, you're having a tremendous influence, not just on that person, not just on your organization, but on your entire profession. And that is pretty compelling. The chance to promote best practices and to have the opportunity to say, I think this works really well. This is what has worked for me. And as you share that, that person is going to take it and share it with somebody else. So it's really an opportunity to carry on those best practices. Establishing and increasing connection, having access to new resources. This gets to the idea of relationship and internal networking in general. The more connections that you have, the more information you're going to have available, the more experience that you're going to have that you can ask questions of. And this is what maybe one of the most powerful aspects of mentoring. There are times when there are people, I might not have talked to them for 3 or 4 or even 5 years, but I had a relationship with them at one time, and I know I can reach out and I can ask them a question. This is really powerful. And then there's finally the fulfillment that you get from just helping somebody else, from sharing some of your experiences, maybe from heading them off from committing some of the same mistakes that you have made. That's a tremendous amount of fulfillment that comes with that opportunity. So if you're having some challenges attracting mentors, maybe think about some of the things from this list and use some of these ideas as a way to convince people, like, I should try this. Might be a good idea. All right, so let's get down to some of the specifics. So we're going to get down to the meeting level. When I meet with my mentee or my mentor, this is what we should talk about. During your first meeting, I really suggest talk about, and this goes to setting expectations. How much time are you willing and able to spend between meetings? This is important because there's not much that's more frustrating as a mentor than to spend this time. You spend an hour, maybe more with a mentee, you go through exercises, you give them suggestions, you come back 2 weeks later and they've done none of it. That's pretty frustrating. So talk up front as a mentor and say, I'm really pleased to have this role with you. I look forward to growing and learning together. How much time are we going to spend? I think I have maybe an hour or 2 outside of our meetings. How much time do you have? Talk about that. Talk about how frequently you're going to meet and using what medium. Are you going to meet coffee? Are you going to meet in a conference room? Are you going to meet virtually? Are you going to send text messages? Whatever the case may be. Whatever works for your relationship, but talk about it. What is the expected duration of the relationship? This gets back to this exit strategy. You could say, let's plan a meeting for the next 2 months and see how it goes from there. Or it might be, I'm willing to leave this open-ended, but if this happens and this happens, then we might know that it's time to talk about what's next. And how will you know when the relationship has run its course and both mentor and mentee have gotten value? Maybe you don't know an exact end, but you know, like, when this happens, I'm going to feel pretty satisfied that this relationship has been beneficial. And identify what are those points that either of you can say, this just isn't for me. It might be you get too busy. It might be that you get a promotion or a different position. It could be a host of things. But identify when is it okay to step away. So now I've got a couple of examples of how a mentoring relationship might go. So we'll walk through these. The mentor says, why did you sign up for mentoring? I want to be a manager. Good for you. It's a hard job, but I enjoy it. Why do you want to be a manager? Well, people already come to me with their questions and I like helping them. So as a mentor now, you're going, all right, we need to have some expectation setting about what it means to really be a manager. So as a mentor, you might say, one of the hardest lessons I learned when I became a manager is that having the answers is the easy part of the job. It's harder to keep team members motivated and focused. I think it would be helpful to explore the full scope of a manager's position. How about if we make it our goal to review 2 or 3 manager job descriptions and talk about what each responsibility means? So here's the mentor who's recognizing that the mentee doesn't really understand the full complexities of a manager job. If this was a coaching session, the coach is going to ask questions about what's the impact that you want to have? What makes you want to be a manager? So it's going to be very much more thought-provoking as opposed to the mentor who is providing, hey, this is what I've learned, and these are some really specific things that we're going to do. So those are some of the specifics that I have out there. Also, as a mentor, think about tools like this. You don't have to have the answers. You often just have to know where to find the answers. So bringing in resources such as 2 or 3 job descriptions. This isn't my opinion. This is what is posted that people are looking for when they're hiring a manager. Let's look at what this job requires. Let's go through another example. Why did you sign up for mentoring? I don't have a specific reason. I just want someone to talk to. What's going on that makes you feel that way? I just feel lost. I'm not sure this is the right career for me. I'm a mentor. I can relate to that. There are some days when I wonder if I'm in the right career too. How about if we make the goal of our conversations to talk about how and why you got into insurance sales and make a list of what you do and don't like about it? That might give you clarity. Along the way, I'll share my experience and what has worked for me. So again, it's very specific. And the mentor here is doing a nice job of setting up a goal. Let's make a list. Let's do something really specific. So it's not just an open-ended conversation. Open-ended conversations have their place and they're a very valuable part of this process. But to really get the most value, you should be as specific as possible. And again, this is a tangible exercise such as list making. It's really helpful. So the meeting, how do we allocate the time during the mentoring meeting? So assuming your meetings are an hour long, the first 10 minutes or so, you're going to just set the priorities. This is the mentee who's going to take the lead during this part of the meeting. So they're going to talk about progress, what the action items are that they took, that they followed through on, what happened, what are the results. The mentor is going to ask questions. Did that go what you expected? How did that feel? Well, that sounds a little bit like a therapist, but did you like that? Did you learn something from that? Do you want to try that again? So this really sets the tone of reviewing what happened since the last meeting and what are we going to focus on for this meeting. So then you get the core part of the conversation. So this is going to be the lion's share feeding off of the mentee's experience from the previous meeting. And here the mentor is going to share experience and ask questions. The mentee has to participate, show some vulnerability, ask clarifying questions, and accept and reflect on the challenges. And then I have here some sample questions that a mentor might use. What did you learn from the work that you've been doing? What has been your biggest surprise? What has been difficult? How do you feel about that? And then you get to the advice giving part because the mentor offers advice, again, as opposed to a coach who doesn't offer advice. And a manager who might offer advice, but it's usually going to be very limited to a very tactical purpose. So when I've been faced with this situation in the past, I have always found it really helpful to fill in the blank, whatever, depending on the situation. They're going to share their mistakes. I once made this mistake. In fact, I've made this mistake more times than I care to talk about. So my advice is this, and this is the meat of the conversation. And then you're going to close out the conversation with the mentee identifying what they are going to do before the next meeting. The mentor is going to provide direction, suggestions, advice, maybe come up with some exercises that might help the mentee work through where they are. The mentee might share things like, I'm feeling, I'm not sure about, before our next conversation, I will. So those are some really key and important parts to having a good mentoring program. One is understanding the role that relationships have in employees' development, and then on the aggregate in an organization's development. Talk about those relationships, have really clear expectations. Think creatively about how you can make mentoring part of your culture at your organization. And then think about supporting the mentor, supporting them through helping them establish expectations with the mentee, helping them manage the meetings, giving them some tools to work through some challenges they might not expect, or some challenges that might be particularly difficult. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jeremiah, who has some closing comments and will solicit questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Before we open it up for our question and answer, I just want to let everyone know that CPIT is ready to help your organization or help you develop a mentorship or coaching culture for your leaders. I would love to set up a time to talk with you more about our custom coaching, consulting, and professional development programming in these particular areas. So my email's on the screen, and I look forward to further exploring any of these options with you or with your organization. So with that, we'll now open it up for questions. And as a reminder, just feel free to drop your questions into the webinar chat or the question and answer section, and we'll get to those right away. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and having this conversation about this relationship between mentors and mentees. I guess one of the questions that I have is, I have a mentee who doesn't do the things that we agree to, or they'll do between our meetings. So this is pretty frustrating, and it makes me wonder if this is really worth my time. How do I motivate the mentee to follow through on what they commit to?
So in situations like this, I'm a big fan of using questions. And when we met 2 weeks ago, you said that this is something that you wanted to do. It seems like you haven't had time. What's been going on that's been getting in the way? We'll start with a question, give the mentee the opportunity to provide an explanation. But if that happens too many times, and the mentor is going to have to know what too many times means, it might be twice, it might be 5 times, then that's when it's time to start talking about, is this worth either of our times to continue? Or is this really being productive and meaningful for either of us? And this is where it's important at the beginning to talk about expectations, so that if you get to this point where things aren't getting done, then it's time to start bringing this up and say, is this working for either one of us? But be direct, but start with curiosity and with assuming good intent, because things do happen. Maybe an assignment wasn't exactly meaningful or didn't have the impact, and they weren't motivated by it. But eventually you're going to get to the point where you might have to have a conversation about ending.
That's good. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
I know it's always difficult to get mentors, or it can be. They're either like too busy, they don't think that they have anything to offer. How do I get mentors to be interested?
You might need a recruiting campaign, just like you would be recruiting for a position. You might need to do some advertising. Share maybe those lists of what's in it for the mentor. Add your own. Maybe some testimonials from mentees who have said, I've had a mentor that has been very impactful. This is how they helped me. Or you can have other people who have been mentors who have said, I was a mentor. I wasn't sure it was for me either, but ended up being a great thing. I learned a lot. So I think as much as you can be really clear about what the commitment is. I think that's a lot of times why people don't sign up, because of, I don't have time. I can't spend hours a week. So be really clear. This is 1 hour a week, 1 hour every other week. Have an endpoint. And I know I've said that a lot, but that takes a lot of pressure off of thinking you're signing up for this open-ended, who knows where this is going to end. So people know, and they can plan and they can predict. A lot of the resistance goes down. But it's really going to be those stories and those relationships are what's going to draw people in.
Michelle, I recognize that a lot of organizations don't necessarily have mentor-mentee official programs, or how do we get buy-in from those senior leaders for a mentoring program?
So you need a champion. And the champion can be anybody. It doesn't have to be a leader, but it has to be the person who has the enthusiasm and the experience and really believes in the importance and the value of a mentoring program. So that person is the cheerleader and they never take their foot off the gas. That person, if they are having a hard time convincing leaders, they have to understand what language the leader is speaking and what makes a difference to the leader, and talk in those terms. So if turnover is very high and you hear leaders sort of wringing their hands about turnover, being as high as it is, constantly recruiting, constantly filling positions, you can come in and say, well, I have an idea. This might be a way that we can increase our retention, both of the mentees and the mentors. So knowing what is going to speak to the people that you want to convince. It might be that you have to do a very small, very quiet pilot program. And I'm not talking about, being deceptive about it, but this is a positive thing overall. So maybe you don't make a big splash about it, but you set up 2 or 3 mentoring pairs and you get some successes under your belt. And then you can use those as case studies for, see the difference that this made because somebody met somebody else. Their time management improved so much that their efficiency improved and they got more work done. We promoted them, and now we have stability in this position where we haven't had stability before. So you have to speak the language of the leader is really what's most important.
Oh, that's such a good recommendation. How do you align the goals of a mentoring program for those senior leaders to the strategic priorities of an organization?
So strategically, if you have a strategic staffing plan, and your strategic staffing plan probably includes a succession plan of some sort. And so we've got these key positions, these are the people in these positions, and each of these positions have potential successors listed underneath them. And I guarantee that you will have 2 or 3 positions on this chart where there are no successors, or there are no successors who are very well prepared. That is a straight arrow to someone who might be, maybe they're on the 7 or 8 year horizon, but you want to accelerate that. Give them a mentor and really get that experience and that knowledge to them quicker than they will get it by making 3 or 4 years of mistakes on the job. And so strategically, as you look at what are the positions that we need, what is our bench strength, where that bench strength is weak, the perfect place to plan and introduce a mentoring program. So the alignment to strategy is really pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do.
Awesome. Michelle, are there any recommended professional organizations or outside of work activities or opportunities, excuse me, to have a mentor and or a coach? And I guess I can biasly answer this one myself a little bit, but CPED definitely has a whole bunch of coaches, consultants, educators that work one-on-one with with individuals. My role, I could certainly help individuals and organizations with either establishing a mentor program or connecting individuals with mentors or coaches. But Michelle, I want to turn it over to you for the unbiased answer.
Well, coaches, like coaching in the technical sense of the term, those coaches, they have gone through hours and hours of training, experience. There's rigorous testing that's involved. It is a very technical and a very specialized role. And CPET, I know, has some very well qualified coaches that are going to be very aligned to the content in CPET courses. So for someone who's a customer of CPET, that would be a really good place to start. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting there. Otherwise, there are a host of coaches. If you go to LinkedIn and you do Coach Madison, Wisconsin, you're going to see a whole bunch of them. But professional organizations are a really good source of mentors. So mentoring doesn't really have any sort of a certification process. It's more of a just tell what you know through your experience. And so one organization that I'm part of is Women in Biotech. And this is the organization that every year they have a mentoring program. And members sign up to be a mentee or they sign up to be a mentor. So there might be a lot of professional organizations that do that. I know SHRM does that, the Society of Human Resource Management. There might be other industry organizations that do the same. And if they don't, bring it up and try to start it. I guarantee you will get a lot of takers.
Thank you, Michelle. One other question regarding setting up a mentor program within your own organization and getting executive buy-in to do something like that. So the question revolves around sharing data or information that backs the establishment of a mentor program. Can you refer to us to any organizations or survey studies, anything like that, that would be beneficial for those individuals looking to either establish a mentor program or do some more research on it, of where they might be able to find some of that additional pertinent information about the benefits of establishing a program like this?
So there is nothing specific that is coming to mind right now, mostly just because I'm having a blank mind moment. But I know that there are many, many studies that talk about retention and how important development opportunities are, especially to those generations that are just entering the workforce. And these relationships and these connections are so critical to that development. And not just development, but that idea of belonging and socialization. And in fact, I did just read a blog this morning from the Neuro Leadership Institute that talked about in their studies, they are finding that the social learning that happens from interacting with others is so important. And it makes learning so much more effective than asynchronous learning or reading blogs or reading a book. So there is plenty of evidence that the relationship, just knowing that there's somebody else who is on your side, will make a big difference. But I will look for some specific studies and forward them to you so you can send them out later if there's interest.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. And that's a good segue, actually. Do expect in your inboxes, if you've registered for this webinar, a follow-up email from us with the copy of the recording. So I just want to first say thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time with us. And thank you to our audience so much for attending this webinar and instilling your trust in the Center for Professional and Executive Development in your own professional growth. So with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.